The promise of Messiah to restore Israel, fulfilling the Abrahamic mandate and other covenants, constitutes the hope of Israel and does not differ, except in its refinement, from the hope of the church today. Israel's restoration would necessitate a new covenant because she remained under the curse of the Mosaic covenant. The Redeemer must pay the ransom by the law, demanded by the law, to bring about that new relationship. Before this could happen, God did something unusual. And this is what I'd like you to kind of hone in on. A lot of this you've probably known about, but I'm just suggesting that you present it as a package. It's better than presenting pieces of it. God did something unusual. He transferred world dominion to imperial Gentile powers. Four empires would arise, and times of Gentiles began and terminate in the tribulation, as John records. Babylon, with Nebuchadnezzar as the head of gold, was its first representative. Recalling the garden motif, Daniel 4 speaks of an enormous tree that gave fruit and sustenance to all our birds and creatures of the world. Clearly, the garden alludes to physical rule and dominance of these Gentile powers. The allusion to Cyrus as God's shepherd in Isaiah 44:28 and the direct title of my anointed one in Isaiah 45:1 provides further credence. Israel in captivity and in dispersion cannot observe her temple rites, but can show faithfulness to God in her legal and ethical devotion. In this role, she functions like Daniel, acting on the covenant law instead of Gentile decrees. Speaking in New Testament terms, Israel is salt and light. That's her new role. And I think that McLean actually stresses this idea that there is a new order. There's times of the Gentiles that we sometimes don't appreciate what he's really talking about here. But he's setting it up. He's setting up these four powers, and then when the Messiah comes, he has to take this imperial power down as well. That's one of the important things. And so he has to take that down. God directly shows his sovereignty over nations and protects the remnant in numerous and supernatural ways. When the time of physical activity expires, a part of Israel returns to rebuild. The new temple, however, never reacquires the lost glory of God that Ezekiel narrated. The route of his departure, recorded in the 10th and 11th chapter of Ezekiel, was reversed upon the triumphal entry by the Lord Jesus Christ. Nor does Israel have a king when her captivity ends. The first rule was a Davidite and a Levite as a governor and a priest in the rebuilding of the temple and city, but no king is crowned. Indeed, something of a mystery has come to the fore because the royal line has been cursed. How can God do this now? An interesting parallel, the first rebuilding of the physical temple required a member of the royal line and a Levite, and the coming Messiah also had two of these tribal representatives. Much like Samuel, John the Baptist was a prophet, and so the kingdom was not restored, nor does the presence of God return to the newly erected temple. And I think I put that in there because there is a covenant with Phineas, and that's what John brought up this morning, Dr. Whitcomb, that there is a covenant that's eternal. And I think that's pointed out here as well. Let's see. What time are we supposed to be finished?
15 minutes ago.
Serious?
Well, I mean, if we're going to have time for questions.
Okay. Well, actually, you can read this rest of the stuff. Basically, what I wanted to point out was that, by way of conclusion, the overview presented is not intended to be the final word, but more of an illustration of strategy. Notice how convincing a narrative can be versus a piecemeal discussion. It's like the Da Vinci Code. You put something together in a storyline, and it's actually convincing, has credibility. Let's see. I want to basically, well, I'll stop there. Actually, I want to say this one thing. Proposition 3 from George Peters, Observation 12. The only way to rid ourselves of ill-defined and antagonistic explanations is to adopt legitimate principles of interpretation and then carefully in detail examine the original covenants and promises upon which the kingdom is based. And we have obtained a definition strictly in accordance with these, never to depart from the same without the most express, not inferential proof. What he's saying there is that we don't use parables and we don't use stories from the New Testament to controvert the covenant. The covenants are first. And I don't know how many people here have heard illustrations start out and become sermons. I found this great illustration, I'm going to preach it. And then you find the passages that go around it. All right, we'll have an invitation for those that haven't done that or have done that for repent. But that's essentially what he's saying. He's saying that we can't use parables, we can't use New Testament or allegories or anything else. We have to use the make the covenants controlling, and make the parables the illustrations that they really are. They have to basically come in line with that. All right, I'll stop and I'll let you see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions?
How much influence do you believe that Dr. Walter Martin's views about George Ladd influenced Hank Henningraff?
I'm not familiar.
None. I can't see that Hank Hennegraff was influenced hardly at all by Walter Martin.
Mike, I wanted to return to a point that you had made.
Okay.
It brought, I guess, the idea that dispensationalism is having some difficult times now, particularly because there aren't a lot of academic types that are promoting it. And you used John Piper as an example, as somebody who's been influenced by Ladd. That seems to be somebody that is, drawing young people. I don't know if you use it with that term, but that's my experience. I wanted to sort of bring up, the point again. I observe that personally in my ministry, what I'm doing, and I see that Piper has an outsized influence on young people, particularly young men, considering the ministry. And I'm concerned because, again, I'm trying to perpetuate the heritage that I learned from Dr. Whitcomb as I was his student at Grace Seminary, and uphold the principles of what we might call classic dispensationalism, although where I'm at, I like my job and I don't really want to get in trouble here. But
Right.
if I'm on that side of classic dispensationalism, and I actually do in my classes advocate that, and I draw the charts on the board and everything like that. I don't mean to re-preach this or go too long here. Your point was that you think we just need to package it as a whole in order to try and overcome that, or that the way to address that might be to try and get to the people that are actually still espousing it. Here's the difficulty. I'll expedite this. The problem is that the young people that I have experience with, they may have had an exposure more or less to dispensational premillennials, pre-tribulationism. They get to my school. They're taught that by me and others, and we're trying to perpetuate that. But it's not just in the packaging. There are three elements that are missing. It's not taught with passion, the way that Piper's positions are taught with passion, okay? It's not taught in such a way that the pertinence comes across. It doesn't seem pertinent to the issues of the day. Now, that might seem really odd to us here because we're looking at world events and we're looking at the kinds of things. Again, my wife told me that today on Drudge, somebody said that somebody said in one of the financial publications that it looks like world government might look like it's a possibility now, and this guy, that sort of thing. And we pick up on that sort of thing, but I got to tell you, to the young people, that's not pertinent at all. So there's no passion in teaching dispensationalism. It doesn't seem pertinent to their lives, and so it doesn't come across as persuasive to them. And I'm not suggesting that we need to figure out some way to, repackage it so that it's hip or whatever, and even saying hip is not hip. I don't know what you say anymore.
Cool.
Yeah, it's something, I don't know. I'm completely out of it. It's groovy to me, but it's not. That's not.
Yeah.
And here's the point. The point is that we need to have people with PhDs in positions that teach it with passion, that show its pertinence, and are persuasive when they do so. And that's the problem, because we're not producing those. Those kids go to Bible college or they go to a Christian college, and regardless of what they've got at home in the churches and things like that, they're getting professors that don't think it's that important, or they're not getting the importance of it. And so that's where the problem is. I understand your point about, repackaging it and trying to put things online and stuff like that. But I got to tell you, I mean, it was Dr. Whitcomb's passion for this when I was learning it from him. And I'm trying to do that with my students. And we can't forget, I mean, that's really what's happening. When we send kids off to college, secular college, they lose their faith because that's not being something that's being reinforced there. Okay? So we need to think about that from both ends. And I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is that we need to support, and I guess as a plea, we need to support those of us that are still in that position and encourage more. I need young men that will follow me. I mean, I'm really trying to disciple hard to get some people that will follow me into what I'm doing eventually. And I think that's the kind of thing that we need to do. I mean, maybe we need. Again, this is a great meeting, and it's very encouraging, and the kinds of things I've been that. But I mean, the point is that the kinds of things that Piper puts on to promote his point, that side, is persuasive and appealing to that other side. So I don't know. Maybe
I think it's very emotional.
I think it's but I think that, and again, where's the last real dispensationalist preacher the guy's just really passionate about it?
John MacArthur.
Yeah, well, I mean, John MacArthur. I mean, but then I don't mind John MacArthur. In a couple of shepherds conference ago, he really sort of nailed it when he started talking about hey, if we're going to be Calvinists, we should talk about the election of Israel. Okay, that was great and that sort of thing. But maybe we need to start promoting some people that can really, I don't like this term, but I use it, sell it, communicate it with passion. Let people know that this is exciting. And I mean, when somebody said 666 there, this whole room went, right? Remember that earlier today? Yeah, I mean, some seat in the parliament was 666. We all, oh, that sounds. My kids, they nod off. Okay, they've heard it.
Well, I think a lot of it is you can't put a square peg in a round hole. If a person has a postmodern worldview, they're not going to be a dispensationalist.
Well, again, that's the what I have to deal with. I'm talking about you'd mentioned foundationalism too, and that's another point we could get into. But the point is that I like when postmodernism unpacks modernism. I'm with them when they're telling them the emperor has no clothes. Okay, when postmodernism's working on modernism and foundationalism from a humanistic standpoint, I'm going, right on, guys, but you're just as, naked. I mean, the point is that there's nothing there. And the foundation is in the Bible, and the foundation is teaching it. And the foundation is making sure that this gets across. And that happens, again, I think, with those three things that need to keep in mind. And it can have a variety of forms. It's got to be with passion. It's got to be pertinent to them, and it's got to be persuasive. And
yeah,
that
I guess
can just be the paradigm that we can start thinking. Maybe Dr. LaHaye can come up with another organization to.
I'm just coming from the point of view that when people come out of the seminaries or come out of the Bible college, they don't really understand eschatology, they don't understand dispensation, nothing, and so they just leave it alone. And of course, we can all traffic in excitement. I mean, that's the going currency. Right now, we try to get people excited about this, and just get them out rushing around doing stuff without any direction, and that's what I see with the Piper crowd. Primarily, we're going to talk about missions. We're going to do this, and I'm mission oriented, but I also realize you have to have some content.
I think the missions part is the pertinent part. I mean, that's why it, again, the passion.
That's what the Southern Baptists were all about. That's what they thought they could hold the entire denomination together from 1842 on,
right,
with missions, and they obviously.
Again, but that. That's again. You have again these things it's like something that needs to be held together, and somebody's got to do it. Maybe we need to identify the young men that are all moving in that direction, and make sure that they're hooked up with somebody that can disciple them in that path.
Southern Baptists have never been dispensational at their academic level ever. So I don't know what they're losing or getting back to, but.
If I look back at the faith chapter, when I see people actually making a difference for the gospel, I'm looking at people that believe that God was in the control of everything, started it, sustained it, had a plan for it. That's a sign. And so that's what got them motivated to go ahead and endure. And it was an understanding of everything. So dispensation gives you a handle on how to, in fact, keep those things together and have a real biblical faith. I'd say that in response to that as well.